All right, well, let's get this show on the road. Welcome, everyone. I am Susan Weller, the director of the University of Nebraska State Museum. And as a Smithsonian affiliate, it really is an honor and a pleasure to host the Smithsonian's Cultural Rescue Team, particularly at this most appropriate time in Nebraska's history. So unfortunately, with all the flooding, we are very much in need of this workshop. But welcome to those of you who are joining us remotely. And I'm going to ask Cory Wagner, who's in charge of this program, to say a few words. Cory?
Thanks a lot, Susan, and thanks to the museum for hosting us. We're really proud to have such a wide network of Smithsonian-affiliated museums where we can reach out to them in times of need and be able to come locally to put on a program like this. So I'm Cory Wagner, director of the Smithsonian Cultural Rescue Initiative, and this is an outreach program of the Smithsonian going beyond the walls of our museums on the Mall in Washington, D.C., and bringing to you the Smithsonian's expertise. So we do this work in partnership with the FEMA and other organizations who make up an organization called the Heritage Emergency National Task Force. And in support of that, we put on Saving Your Family Treasures workshops. Sometimes we do them at FEMA disaster recovery centers, which are just now standing up here in the Nebraska area, in Iowa, and will be probably going to other states as they experience more flooding. And we've worked all over the country and even sometimes internationally on our programs for the Cultural Rescue Initiative, working with other museums, helping them respond to disasters. So today I have with me three Smithsonian colleagues, Caitlin Averett, Nana Kenneco, and Becca Kennedy, and Becca and Nana will come on up and we'll get the program started. Thanks.
Hi everyone, I'm Becca, this is Nana.
Hello.
So we're gonna take turns showing you everything that we have in front of us today. We're also, at any point, please feel free to ask us questions. We wanna make sure that we cater to whatever you specifically need from us. So Nana's gonna go ahead and get us started.
Sure, before we start, we just wanna preface our workshop with saying that all the materials that we use here are readily available. You can purchase it at your local hardware store. Most of these things are also available at superstores, Walmart, Super Target, etc. Another thing is that all of these items are very cost efficient. They're not very expensive. And another important thing is that they don't interrupt with things that are necessary for immediate humanitarian needs. So those are things that Becca especially took into mind when developing these techniques. And before we start showing you some of these techniques, we always start with personal safety, with personal protective equipment, because it's of utmost importance to protect yourself during this process. You could think of it in terms of, on an airplane, you want to put the mask on yourself before you help somebody else. And similar thing here. You just don't know what kinds of contaminants are out there. There's a lot of threat with mold issues, particularly in flood situations. So before you proceed with anything, we recommend these nitrile gloves. These are very good for protecting your hands, and so for good practice, we're going to be wearing these throughout the workshop as well. I'll give you a pair as well.
Thank you.
So always want to protect your hands from any possible contaminants. And then another very important thing is to cover your face, because you just never know what kind of mold contaminants are out there. And you don't want to get sick while trying to salvage your things. So we recommend what's called an N95 mask. This is the only grade mask that's going to protect you from mold contamination. And this, I think we got at Walmart. They do definitely have it at the hardware store, but be sure that you look for this N95 grade to protect yourself from molds. Anything else about safety?
I mean, if you need more than this, if you're afraid to put your hands in the water because you're worried about puncture, you can actually wear your nitrile gloves underneath work gloves, or you can have just regular work gloves. Anything that will prevent from puncture. You can also go and get full-on Tyvek suits if you're going to be wading into water that you're not sure what's in it. So think about your safety first, and that's all we ask. Okay?
photographs.
All right. So the question we get asked the most is how to save family photographs. These are very important to, I think, pretty much almost anyone. So we're going to go over those first. What I have set up here, these are 2 aluminum trays, casserole dishes. We have filled these up with distilled water. We use distilled water because unlike tap water, it doesn't have those extra chemicals inside of it, which your body needs, but your photographs and other antiques do not. So it's a little bit pure, and we don't want to add any chemicals to photos and so forth. So I filled up these 2 bins with water because I'm going to do what's called a rinse or a bath. Usually you want to do a minimum of 3 baths, but you can do as many as you need to until you feel like the object is actually completely clean. One of the things I like to work with the most, this is actually just porch screen. It's mesh, very soft and gentle to touch. You, once again, get rolls and rolls of this fairly cheaply, and once you've actually used it, you can wash it and use it again, so it's very cost effective. I like using this for 2 reasons. 1, it's soft. 2, it's like a sieve, so when I pull things out of the water using it, the water just drains right out. The reason we're using this is because anything that's been soaking in water for long periods of time, fabrics, photos, papers, they get really fragile. So if you notice, if you try to pick something up out of the water, it just disintegrates in your hands. So if we actually use a little cradle made out of something like porch screen, it actually will keep it from falling apart. So what we've created here in this bucket, we've created a mini flood, very mini flood in this bucket. So what I'm going to do, you don't have to peek in, but I'm going to take this porch screen and I'm going to scoop out a photograph. And while I'm going to use the water of the flood to manipulate the photo onto the screen because it's strongest while it's in the water. Once you take it out of the water, that's when it gets weaker. So once I've gotten the photo onto the screen, and you can have a buddy help you. You don't have to do it by yourself. Our dexterity is a little bit better because we do this all the time. But if you need help, someone to hold the screen, someone to help manipulate the photo, you can do that. But when I lift it out, it's on it like a little cradle, and the water has just streamed off through the holes in the screen. So now I'm going to take it over to my bath, and keeping it on the screen, I'm going to slightly submerge it and give it its first wash. And the idea is that it goes from a really dirty bath to a slightly cleaner bath to an even cleaner bath. So we're slowly getting it cleaner and cleaner. And then once the water is too dirty, you just throw it out and refill with fresh water. And you do this until all your stuff is clean. So now I have a clean photograph. So now we have to dry it. There's 2 good methods for drying it. 1, you can lay it out, and you always want to lay it with the picture side up because you don't want to damage the emulsion on the top. That's one way, but it takes up a lot of counter space real quick to lay out all your photos. So the other method we use, and I'm still keeping it on the porch screen, is you can hang it on a clothesline. So I set my clothesline here. I have clothespins, and you just pick a corner that you don't mind getting slightly dented, and you can just hang it up to dry. This is pretty much how they were developed. They were developed in water, and they were developed being hung up. So they're very comfortable like this. And then you would just leave them to dry, not in direct sunlight. You don't want to put any heat next to them, just have a nice air circulation. So a fan just in the room, keeping it going. Because if the air holds too still, you do have the risk of mold. But as long as your humidity is low and air is moving, these should dry just fine. And they may not be perfect and perfectly flat, but they'll at least be where you can have your memories intact, and you can scan them later if you need to. A big other question we get about photos is, what if they're already stuck together? They've dried and they're stuck. That's fine. If they're post 1970 and not bleeding and the ink's not coming off of them, you can actually just throw them back into the distilled water and let them soak for up to a day. And we have had pretty good success of the photos coming apart again after a day or so. It's not been 100% success, but it's been 50 to 60% success. And if they're already stuck together, you don't have a lot to lose by trying this method. So we really encourage you to give it a go. And randomly, I'll come over and I'll agitate them. Like while they're soaking, I'll just rub my hand gently over them while they're in the water, back and forth, to use a little bit of water force to very gently and just see where they are. I don't pull them out of the water and try to rip them apart. I just agitate them in the water. And it's pretty miraculous how many of them will come apart in that just by soaking. Anything prior to 1970, we don't recommend you rinse again because they're developed in a layer method and they'll just continue to fall apart if you re-add them to water. Photos are hard, so this is the longest part, guys, so bear with me. If you have photos in an album like this, you don't want to reach in and try pulling them out. You have a risk of ripping them or getting them stuck to the plastic on the top. So what we do, we take a knife and we cut along the edges of the plastic sleeve, and then we gently pull it back. So then your photo is fully exposed, and then you can gently lift it out and rinse it if you need to, if it's been in dirty water, or just hang it up to dry. But now you don't have to pull on it when it's weak.
What if it doesn't come out?
If it's stuck, if by this point it's so dry where this plastic sheeting is stuck on the top, just stop. You don't want to damage it, scan it. And just deal with a new digital image and have it reprinted if you want to. But you don't want to pull it off and then you've lost your memory and the image. Pictures that are framed. Thank you kindly.
You're welcome.
It's a group effort.
Yes, it is.
If it's really, really wet, you risk damaging the photo by taking it out of its frame. Our biggest fear is that the image will become attached to the glass on the frame. So what we do is I usually take either sponges or blocks of wood, and I would just elevate it so air can get underneath it and let it dry on its back. And the reason is so the weight away from it is that it doesn't dry attached to the glass. You want to get as far away from the glass as possible. And then when it's dry enough, I can unframe it. If it's only slightly wet and you feel like you can safely unframe it, go ahead and do it. And do the same thing. We'll rinse it if it's dirty, and then dry it, or if not, straight to drying it. Okay. Any questions about photos? Yes.
So I have one that is stuck. This is not from a flood, but it's just stuck to the glass. I was told at one time to put it in water, and I've been afraid to do that.
Yeah, so the problem is with putting it in water when it's attached to glass is that there's no give and take. The glass is not, when you put two photos together, there's a little give and take between the materials, which is why they'll separate. With glass, that's not the case. Only the picture will move and the glass won't, so you'll end up just losing that surface. So usually if something's stuck to glass, you need to have it professionally removed from the glass. If you're really, really attached to that photo, you can seek out help, and the Ford Conservation Center in town is a great resource for that. But if not, you can just scan it through the glass and create a new digital file for yourself and have it reprinted.
So where did you say to go to get help?
It's in Omaha.
It's in Omaha, the Ford Conservation Center.
Okay, in Omaha, okay.
Yeah. So that is photos. Any other questions? Okay.
Another thing is an ink solubility test is something that you can do if you have a photo and you're not sure if it might bleed in the water. You can just take a Q-tip and just dip it in the water and then just test it on the corner of a photo and see if it bleeds. If there's a mark on the Q-tip, it means it's probably going to bleed in the water, and it's not suggested that you put it in. So that helps you to assess whether you want to use this method as well. So you will do paper and then?
It's up to you.
All right, let's talk about paper. So with paper, like photos, are very delicate in the water. And so you use a similar technique of this porch screen, and we have a nice letter prepared in this lovely pool of water here. And again, you want to keep in mind that paper is very fragile, but it's a little bit more fluid in the water. So you want to try to manipulate it as much as possible while it's submerged. You don't want to hold the paper up in the air and then try to play with it, because chances are it's going to rip and fall into pieces. So I'm just carefully manipulating the paper here while it's in the water, and carefully trying to spread it open as much as I can. And it's being supported by that porch screen. You want to use that almost like a third hand to help you support this piece of paper. So this is a technique that we recommend for things like birth certificates or diplomas or paper that's valuable to you that can't be replaced. So pretty good at this point. So I have it here using my porch screen as a cradle. And then with paper, what we like to recommend is a sandwich method. But before that, you want to go through and rinse it again. So just like the photos, you put it in the dirtiest first. And again, you can manipulate it at this point as well and try to kind of smooth it out. And we put it into the cleaner bath. And you can have 3 or 4, however many you feel that you need. And then once it's in a pretty good state, then you want to prepare some towels.
Put it out for you.
Oh, perfect. Thank you. So if you have an assistant, even better. So we have an absorbent kind of pad here. You can use a towel, a paper towel, whatever you have on hand. Use the porch screen. Lay it on that first layer of your sandwich. Then you can carefully peel off the porch screen like so. And you can probably do this better than I can. This goes back. And then we want another layer over the sandwich. So for our purposes, we'll use this towel. And then the next thing you want to do is ideally get a piece of plexiglass or something big and solid. And this is going to help to distribute the weight. That's going to help release the moisture from this piece of paper. So don't use an album in real life, but we don't have a piece of plexiglass on hand. So we'll just use this for demonstration purposes. So you want to lay that on your towel. And then finally, you want to get something that's heavier, something that's a weight, and just simply set it on top. And then this is going to help to distribute the weight and just kind of pull out the moisture from that piece of paper.
And you want to switch out the towels when they get too wet because you're at risk of mold growth. So this is something you have to switch out every few hours or so. And then as it gets drier, you could wait like a day or so until all the paper completely comes out. So it's kind of a lot of work, which is why you want to save this for your really important irreplaceable papers, not something you could reprint or rebuy. Okay.
Can I ask a question? What if your paper work or the papers you want to save are already sort of dry, they're not still in standing water? Should you, if they're mucky, should you try to put them in water to rinse them off, or should you just save them the way they are if they're dry?
If they're already dry, I wouldn't re-wet them. But if they're still damp, you can go ahead and re-wet them. But if they're already dry and they're mucky, we can show you how to vacuum off any sort of the muck that is on there.
So for vacuuming, again, your best friend, the porch screen, comes into play. So say that this is the vacuum tip. You just simply cover it with the porch screen, and then you can vacuum off any mold spores or spots on your object. And then just be sure to empty out the vacuum bag and protect yourself from any possible further contamination.
Right, and just make sure you wear your N95s before you handle any mold. And one of the other methods is to use a paintbrush. We use a clean paintbrush, not one you've used before in your house. And you can gently brush off any sort of debris and have it go into the vacuum hose. Because we don't want to ever have your vacuum hose come in direct contact with the object. And the point of the screen, whether you lay your screen out or put it on your vacuum hose, is to keep any part of your item from being sucked up into the vacuum. That's what we're trying to avoid. So it's amazing how strong those vacuums are when you don't want them to be. So, okay. Any questions? Yeah.
You talked about the 1970 on the photograph. So what if it's an older photograph or a mounted photograph that it's on a mounting board? What do you do with those?
Those I would just let dry. The reason we're not re-rinsing them is because there's a risk of the layers separating. And when those layers separate, the photo just is gone. And so if you get them out of the water and they're still intact, that's a huge success. So you just want to, at that point, dry them. The rinsing is just to remove any sort of black water or E. coli that's in the water for your safety and for future use. But you don't want to go to the point where you've lost what it is you were trying to save by rinsing them too much. So because of the way older photos were made, it's not advised to rinse them. So at this point, just go straight to the drying method of either hanging them out to dry or laying them out to dry. And after a while, if you are still worried about the toxins from the water, just put them into sleeves, and so that you don't ever actually handle them in the future. Because a lot of the toxins that are in the water are just something that's going to only get into your body if you touch something and then stick your fingers in your mouth. So just need to create a nice little barrier between you and them. But you would still have the images.
Any other paper-related questions before we move on to books?
All right.
Okay, so back to our lovely pool of briny water. This time we're going to pull out a book. And with books, we basically have 3 techniques that you can use, and we like to label them as good, better, and best. So it's really a matter of what resources are available to you and how much time you want to invest in this effort and are able to invest. And so we want to kind of emphasize this idea of prioritization, right? And we use this example time and time again, but say you have a Harry Potter collection, that can be bought on Amazon within the click of a button. So you probably don't want to spend the time trying to salvage your Harry Potter collection, unless maybe it's a special edition that's signed by J.K. Rowling, or it has some sort of significant value to you. So that's something that's important in thinking about when you're trying to save your things, is what's worth the time and effort, right? Because there are so many things, but I'm sure that the priorities you have, it varies from person to person. And so another thing I recommend is, before a disaster strikes, have a priority list. Talk with your spouse and decide what's important to the two of you, or maybe you might get in some fights and decide that one of you likes something and one of you prioritizes something else. But to have that list handy, and then to have those objects that are important to you set aside, that's going to help you in this salvage state as well. So we have a book here. It's ideal to demonstrate with a hardback, but we have a paperback for today's purposes.
It happens to paperbacks too, where they get wet.
Yeah, that's true. So I'm just kind of gently squeezing the book here and trying to help it maintain its shape. If you have a book with a dust jacket on it and you want to keep that dust jacket for whatever reason, then you treat it the same way as paper. So go through the rinse and then the sandwich method and dry it out. So we have our book here. We're going to do the rinse. You want to hold it closed as you rinse it, and that'll help keep the shape of the book as well. So again, from dirtiest to cleanest, gently squeezing, like so. So method number 1, which is the good method, is what's called a Fanny method, and it might be a little tricky to do with this paperback, but we'll give it a try. Basically, just stand up the book and then open the pages, and you're going to fan it out to dry, like so.
This is a better method when the book is not this soaked, when a book is only slightly damp or a little bit of wet, because as you can tell, the book does not want to be fanned, and we don't want to force an item to do what it's not comfortable doing, because that's the whole point of these trainings.
So it's already protesting, as you can see. But say this was a hardback book. Then you can use this method, but the one thing that you want to bear in mind if you decide to do this is that it's going to dry in the shape that it's in. So you're not going to get this nice closed book. It's going to be kind of open and fanned out like so. So that's method number 1, is the fanning method. Number 2 is what we like to call the interleaving method. And so for this method, you're going to need some paper towels. We like these make-a-size ones because they're generally the perfect size for a book. Just want to make sure that your paper towels don't have any print on them because it'll bleed onto the book. So just get a few of these. And then every few pages, you just stick a paper towel in, like so. And like magic, these paper towels are just going to draw out that moisture from the book for you. The thing you have to be careful about here is that you don't want to overstuff the book, otherwise you will put stress on the spine of the book here. So just every few pages, put a paper towel in like so, and let it dry. The thing with this method is that it's very labor intensive. You're going to have to keep switching out these paper towels, otherwise it's going to start to mold. So again, think about how much effort you want to put into this. And whether it's worthwhile to you. So that's the negative of method number 2, is that it's very labor intensive. method number 3, which is the best method, is to freeze the book. And so we have an example of that here. All you have to do is wrap the book in freezer paper. You want to make sure that you're using freezer paper, not wax paper or some other sort of paper. And then you want to give it a tight seal with either freezer tape or exterior blue painter's tape. These are the two tapes that are going to withstand that sub-zero temperature and give your book a nice tight seal. You don't want any contaminants or moisture getting into that wrapped book. So you wrap the book and then put it in the freezer, and then that's going to buy you time. So that's going to give you some time to make decisions about what you might want to do with the book down the line. Would you want to take it to a conservator? It's going to prevent mold from growing further. So if you need to quickly just kind of put something away, then the freezer method is good. But the thing is, do you have space in your freezer? Do you have a freezer that's working? So again, these are all factors that we take into consideration when giving these different techniques.
Right. The freezing method is really great for family Bibles and things with onion skin paper, because the interleaving in the Fanny Method is usually very hard on onion skin material. Yeah.
What was the first kind of tape you said?
It's a freezer tape.
Oh, freezer tape.
Freezer
Okay.
tape and exterior blue painter's tape.
Right. So if you have a lot of books, freezing might be the way to go. And then when you have time, you can pull out one at a time and just deal with it one at a time. Just whatever works for you and what you're going through and your stress level. It's just, like she says, buys you time with whatever you need to do. Yeah.
What happens on the books if you have the photographs in them that stick together when they get moist? Then do you try to put that some kind of interweaving in?
Yeah,
They're
so-
still in the water?
So anything that's made of coated paper or anything with photos or things like that, that should be like yearbooks and stuff like that. That should be one of your priority objects, because when those get wet, they kind of gum up, and when they dry, they adhere together. So when those are wet, that's your best time to work with them. And you need to go through in almost every single page, or the pages that are important to you, interweave some sort of wax paper. And that wax paper will, when it dries, you'll still be able to take the pages apart. So that should be your priority. So even if you're freezing it, have that wax paper, wrap up in the freezer paper, and then put it away. So it should always have a layer between it to keep them from adhering. Yeah.
So what do you do after they're dry? We've got some that are dry.
The coated paper?
Well, yeah, and just books that you can, boy, they've got the mildew.
Okay. Yeah, well, with the mildew, first of all, you need to make the mildew and mold become inactive. And the problem is you have too much moisture. And the moisture needs to get below 55%. And once you get below 55%, it'll become powdery. And once it's powdery, you can vacuum it off using the same method. Unfortunately, that staining is semi-permanent unless you want to send it to a professional to help you get rid of some of that staining. I would not recommend any methods for you to try at home. But that staining can be removed if you want it to go to that level. But it can be, but the moisture level can get down to where that odor and the active spores go away. And then you can vacuum it off with a screen or with a brush into it, wear your PPE, and that will help and go a long way. But your humidity needs to be below 55%. That's the big key there. And but the pages that are already stuck together, if they're regular pages, regular paper, pulled paper, that can be a simple fix. But if it's that glossy paper, it's a much harder thing if it's able to be fixed at all. But that's where a professional conservator could really help you out. Sorry.
Yes.
And someone online asked if there's no room in the freezer, is the refrigerator helpful at all?
Yes. I mean, anytime you're cooler and you have a lower humidity, it will help. But yeah, the freezer will buy you more time. Your fridge is not going to help you, especially if you're opening it constantly. It's not going to help as much. So
Ask your friends.
yeah, ask your friends and family if they have a freezer or deep freezer that you can borrow, or go in on one together. So, okay. Any other questions? Okay.
So while we're on the topic of freezers, freezer bags are also your best friend here. You can put things in the freezer bag. Just make sure that you have a very tight seal before you put it in the freezer. And we'll be talking about textiles later, but that's an option as freezer bags as well. And then we also wanted to share this collapsible crate. So basically it just folds up like this. It's very portable, lightweight. This is handy if you have a few books that you want to freeze. So say that you have your nice freezer paper wrapped books. You want to put them in the crate spine side down. And then this way this will help kind of keep them in place. And these could go into the freezer as well. Another handy use for these crates is carrying several books at a time across the room. So it's useful to have one of these on hand regardless of the collapsible crates.
Yep. Great. All right, so we'll go over objects in 3D material next. So if you have any sort of items in your house, heirlooms that are made of wood, the first thing you want to do is get these wiped down if they've been in toxic water. You don't want to rinse them off the way we've been rinsing off everything else. You actually want to just sponge these down with a wet sponge and then quickly wipe them down afterwards. The best way to dry these off is just the blotting method. You don't want to wipe them, especially if they have like a painted design or a varnish on them. If they are getting a little mildewy or a little musty smelling, you can actually wipe them down with a 10-to-1 vinegar wash, 1 part vinegar, 10 parts water. Very, very gentle. If they have a varnish or a painting, I wouldn't even use the vinegar. I might use 1 part Dawn, 10 parts water. But either way, if I'm adding anything, a vinegar or a Dawn, I would test it in an inconspicuous part, like on the bottom or a back corner, to make sure it didn't have any adverse effects before I used it all over anything else. But you also want to make sure, you want to give it room to breathe, but you don't want to completely remove all the parts. So like if it's a big chest of drawers, you just want to pull the drawers out enough so it can get airflow, so mold doesn't grow, but you don't want to pull them all the way out because it will help warp its shape with all the drawers removed and things like that. But you just want to keep blotting it. Putting it out in the sun or accelerating its drying when it's wood actually makes it warp more, and you're going to have more cracks. A slower dry actually helps it retain its shape. So just keep blotting and blotting and blotting. And there's been several occasions when there's been so much wood, you can wrap something in a white sheet and just let it keep pulling moisture out, and then randomly change out the sheets if you got to do a lot of moisture. So just, it's a slow dry for this stuff. For metals and glazed ceramics, once again, it's just a wipe down. You can actually wipe these down with a wet sponge and just make sure no corrosion starts to form. If corrosion starts to form, don't try to pick it off yourself. You can probably seek a professional. And these microfiber cloths, again, work really well. The one big caveat to all this is unglazed ceramics where you don't want to re-wet them. Just wipe them down. Okay? If it's upholstered furniture, you can rinse them off the upholster part, but just remember, if you're getting it really, really, really wet again, you're going to have to dry that out again. And you might want to remove the upholstered part and wash it separately from a wooden part or a metal part, because they're going to be drying at different rates and have different needs. So if you can remove them safely, try doing that. Okay? Any questions about furniture? 3D objects, little figurines?
Could you guys talk about musical instruments again? Somebody had asked about that on Friday.
Yes, musical instruments are difficult. So musical instruments, if they get wet, when they get wet, should be removed from their cases. It's more damaging for them to be in their cases where they have, once again, different materials for them to interact with. They need to be slow dried and, once again, blotted and kept an eye out for any sort of corrosion and so forth. But then even once that's done, you need to be taken to a professional tuner and somebody else who can keep an eye out for them. But definitely remove them from their cases, because most of the damage will come from the felt, the wet container, and the metal brackets inside of the carrying case. So, okay.
So how would you remove mildew smelling from the case itself on the outside?
Of a musical instrument case? I would do the vinegar. I would just spray vinegar onto a cloth and wipe it down.
Okay, so you got the instrument redone. but not in the case, so it's still sitting in a bag in the basement. It smells so bad. You can't
Yeah.
take it out.
Well, it's going to get worse if the longer it's kept inside of a bag. So because the bag just creates the bag just acts like an incubator.
Well, yeah, it's been there for years. It's like 4
Yeah.
years.
So if you take it out of its bag, embrace it, and start slowly getting it into a controlled human environment for those mold spores
Uh-huh.
to not die, inactivate. They never die. Inactivate. Then you can slowly wipe them off with a
Okay.
reduced solution. But yeah, we never use anything harmful like bleach or anything like that ever. But these are things that you're going to have to start reincorporating into your life. So it's up to you to make the final call of what you need to do to make yourself feel comfortable around them.
What about like leather that's been put into a saddle or shoes or coats, or it's a hide?
Yeah. That's again, if it's gotten wet, or is it wet or is it moldy?
We've gotten one in that it just stinks really bad, so it was wet at some time,
Yeah, but it doesn't show any signs of mold?
only like under the armpits.
Oh, okay. Then you just have a moisture problem then. You don't have a mold problem, which is good for the most part. You just need, it's once again, it's retained too much moisture for its own good. And there's these closet moisture reducers that they sell at Walmart and Target and things like that. And they're just silica gel inside of these little containers. And the silica gel can actually help reduce the moisture in an area wherever you put it. And so if you actually take it and you put it inside of a Rubbermaid bin or something like that, and don't let the silica ever touch whatever you're trying to dry, because silica can actually cause damage, it'll just reduce the moisture wherever it's enclosed. So it'll actually pull the moisture out of whatever is near it.
But it was like that when we got it. It's dry at this point in time and then low humidity. Any way to address that other than brushing it? We brush it back and we stop there.
Okay. And it still has that odor to it. Yeah, the silica gel might be the way to go then, because it might help you do it. And that's one way. The other way is there are some odor reducing, like activated charcoal cassettes and things like that are just known for pulling odor out of the air, but they won't change your humidity. But usually something smells musty, it's a moisture problem, not a mold problem. And that's usually because just whatever it is, because everything around us produces moisture or a perm. And every time that moisture content just accumulates from all over, it has nothing to do with how much air or humidity we're pumping into the room. It's just what that object is producing itself. So it's quite possible that leather jacket is producing its own moisture, if that makes sense. It has its own perm. Yeah.
Talk about moisture meter.
Yes, so you can buy your own moisture meters. They range from $20 to $200, and moisture meters are great for many reasons, but people, especially ones who suffer from floods and so forth, have used them to see if something has actually gotten low enough on the moisture scale to not be worried about mold or mildew growth, especially if you have a historic painting that you don't want to unframe because the frame also means something to you, but you don't see mold growth, but you still feel like it looks moist. You can actually put the moisture meter on the back of it and see if there's a high moisture content. And if it's high moisture content, you might want to unframe it because something's not drying out, or you know to move it to a drier location, especially something hanging on the wall, moisture builds behind it. But the moisture meter will let you know if moisture's still back there. And it's just a way to let you know how much unframing, how wet your books still are, how wet your pictures still are, do they still need to dry longer? It just gives you a lot of clues that you cannot see by touching and so forth. The really high-end ones, you could point at a wall and it will tell you if you have a pipe leak in the back of your wall and so forth. But we like using it in our field because I could touch this right now and be like, oh, that feels dry to me, put my moisture meter on it and be like, no, it's not quite dry. If I had put it back into storage, it would have grown mold. But now I know it won't because I put my moisture meter on it. But they range in price. The cheaper ones have 2 prongs that are non-invasive. You just put them up against something and it tells you the moisture rate. The higher end ones are infrared. The infrared ones are really cool. Highly recommend the high-end purchase. So
Where do you purchase those from?
you can get them from any hardware store or Amazon, maybe at Target. I mean, definitely Walmart. I mean,
You
you,
want to get something that's reliable.
yeah.
Like our dehumidifier, we got to take that 2 times.
Yeah, I mean, just a brand like there's so many brands, but you would recognize a lot of the brands that these come in, and yeah.
Granger.
Yeah, Granger definitely makes one. Northern Tool, I think, makes one, things like that. So yeah, there's plenty of brands, and you can check reviews online too before you go. But yeah, they're a great investment. Okay, any other questions? Okay, so we'll go quickly over electronic media. So some people have records that they collect and still have. These are actually fairly simple. Records are very resilient. You just want to take them out of their original holders. This is made the same as paper, so you want to just treat this like it's paper, the same method we use for all paper. The record, you just need to lay out on a flat surface to dry. And that is it. We've actually hung these off of laundry drying racks and things like that. They just need to be flat to dry so that they don't get warped. But then once everything's dry, you can reassemble. If this is so badly warped, you might actually have to cut along one of the seams here to get the record out. You might have to sacrifice it a little bit, but for the most part, it's a very simple drying method. Same with CDs and DVDs. You just need to separate it out, pull out the DVD or CD, lay it flat to dry. And then you can either pull this out and dry it, the paper part out and dry it, the plastic will be okay. And dry it the same as paper, or you can toss it and print out one that looks just like it, depending on how much it means to you. For VHS and cassettes, those are very troublesome for the fact that to fully clean them, you'd have to unspool the whole thing and re-spool it. And that's miles of film per VHS. But you can, if it has been in very toxic water, you can rinse them in the same method. Don't unspool them, but take them to an AV professional to have them thoroughly cleaned afterwards, or converted to another method of viewing, such as something digital. But I always keep my VHSs after I've converted them, because I still feel like those will reign down the line. People will still always revert back to VHS in like 50 years. We'll see them come back. So that's really quick on AV material. Anybody have any other questions about anything specific? Yeah.
And you probably already covered this. I have a wooden frame, could be from the 1920s.
Mm-hmm.
It just smells so bad, but it has that beautiful curved glass, but it smells so bad I can't. So I suppose it must be mildew from where the other items got mildew, from your basement.
Yeah, basements are notorious moisture hoarders, so anything that's been in the basement is going to probably smell like mildew. And your problem is you've got to get their moisture level down. Like, as much as they don't feel like they have moisture, they probably have accumulated moisture. So you need to get them into a location, and it could take weeks or months to get their moisture below 55%. So I think having a moisture meter would go a long way for helping you.
But as far as using like the vinegar and water on the back?
You could do that, yeah. A little vacuum, a little wipe down, totally wouldn't hurt. But don't do it till after their moisture is down, because it won't do you any good. Yeah.
Strange question. Excuse me, years ago I had a piano and I wanted to sell it, so the next owner came and he said there was mold on the back of the piano case. How would you deal with that? How would you clean it?
Is that wood?
Oh, gosh. Probably wood.
Yeah, probably wood.
Yeah, it was old enough, I don't think.
Yeah, I do the same thing. Get a very soft cloth and just wipe it down with the 1 part vinegar, 10 parts water. But just immediately when you spray onto the cloth and wipe it and walk away. And let it air dry very well. Don't, don't like push it back up against the wall and hope it gets good air, but make sure it gets good air so it dries the whole way. But once again, mold never fully goes away. It's always going to be there. It's going to weaken the proteins in the wood, and it's going to forever be a stain. So it's not a perfect solution unless you once again brought in a conservator to help remove those stains. But even then, they're not going to be able to fix the protein loss problem. So, yeah. But it will help, and it'll make you safer from not breathing that in. But you need to make sure your moisture level is down to a safe level before you even try it. So a moisture meter might be a good purchase for you as well to make sure it's not too moist back there. No problem. Okay, so we're going to do textiles, which we mean, by textiles we mean quilts, uniforms, wedding dresses,
Hats, baskets.
Persian rugs, hats, baskets, shoes, anything like that. So depending on the size of the fabric, you can, again, use the porch screen to pull it out of the floodwaters. But if it's controllable with your hands, you can do that as well. If it's really large, you might want to use what Nana is holding, which is pipe insulation. And I'll show you how we use that. But because my bucket's so small, my floodwaters are so small, we're going to use my hands. But I just want to point out, I'm not wringing it. I'm just letting the water drip away. And the reason I'm not wringing it is because right now, all the fibers on this historical tablecloth are so weak from being in the water that if I wring them, they're permanently going to misshape. But it's been in this toxic water, so I still want to rinse it. So I'm going to use this rinsing as an opportunity now to shape it out. Once again, things are a little bit stronger in the water. And also all this black stuff that's been mixed up in the textile. But now I have more space to work with, so I can use my pipe insulation. Pipe insulation, again, is a purchase at the hardware store. And this is great. It comes in many different grades, many different thicknesses. This is meant to go around plumbing pipes. It's meant to work with water, dry from water, without generating mold. But it also is a great circular pole for which I can, instead of dealing with a cumbersome tablecloth, I can now roll this tablecloth and use it as a tool to transport it instead of causing stress on me and the tablecloth. So before I move it to its drying location, we're going to make another sandwich. So Nana's giving me the bottom part of my sandwich, which is just a white towel. And we always use white because we don't want to worry about any bleeding of fabric colors. But if you have another towel that you know for a fact is no longer bleeding colors, you can go ahead and use that too. So now that I've gotten this all washed, I rolled it back up. I'm going to transport it to my sandwich and gently unroll it onto the towel. So instead of being cumbersome and awkward, it just is so easy, and I could handle that all by myself. It works great as a little tool. But if the fabrics on the tablecloth are bleeding, we can put on cheesecloth. Cheesecloth will catch any of the bleeding dyes from being transferred to any further to any other parts of the tablecloth. And now they're put on the top layer of the sandwich, which is another towel. And because these fabrics are so sensitive at this point, like I said, we don't want to wring them. So instead, we're going to push out the moisture using a rolling paintbrush and just push out the moisture. It's much less stress on the fibers. They're just getting a little back massage. It's totally fine. This is a little harsh on any sort of dresses or anything with sequins or beads or things like that, because you want to make sure you're pushing the roller in the right direction. That would not break them. So this may not be the best method for those, but you can try it. If it's up to you, it's your stuff. But just make sure you're pushing in the same direction the beads or the sequins are going, especially on wedding dresses. So once we're done pushing out the water, it's the same level of wetness as if we had wrung it out. So in other words, it's no longer dripping. So now it's much lighter, much more easy to handle, no longer dripping. So now I just need to hang it to dry. So I have another piece of pipe insulation on my clothesline here. And the reason we have it on the clothesline is so we don't get a harsh fold. And it's less stress on the fabric. And then you could just hang it out to dry. But we love the pipe insulation because it has this pre-cut slit, so it easily goes over clotheslines. It easily goes over chain link fences. I can cut this and shape this any way I want, including cutting a hole right here to go over a hanger, and so forth like that. We can also use it, pipe insulation. As I said, it comes in many different grades, but you can cut it to any size. And if you have something you need to shape out like a hat or a basket, you can just shape it out and leave it to dry. And unlike the other stuff where we told you constantly have to switch it out when it gets wet, pipe insulation, you don't have to do that. It's meant to be wet. It's meant to create air circulation. It's meant to dry and not mold. So you can just leave it there and walk away. So you can fold it, stick it up shirt sleeves, shape out a skirt, put it in shoes, put it in baskets, put it in pants legs. It does everything. I don't know what else to advertise how great this stuff is.
One thing to note is that pipe insulation is not the same thing as a pool noodle, and this came up in a previous conversation. Pool noodles are a lot more abrasive and rough, so you want to try to stick to these pipe insulations. They're smooth, and the great thing is it already has the slit for you. So.
And they actually cost less than a pool noodle. So yeah, I would go with that.
Did you reverse the piece that you put in the hat?
Can
Did you reverse it so it's...
straighten it out again?
No, I mean, when you got it folded up, is that inside out now?
No.
It's just been
Still the right way.
so many times.
We just keep folding it over and over again, so it's a little more worse for wear.
Yeah, that's what fold just
You
goes
cut
really
off
different.
the glue part that's on those.
You can get some without the glue parts. So they do have ones that come with the adhesive and ones that come without. These are ones without, which are cheaper than the ones with adhesive. So if you want to do ones with quilt, and we brought a quilt with us. So quilts can get quite large, a lot bigger than the one I was just working with, or anything large like this. Obviously this is too big to rinse in my little bins. So one thing you can do is in your driveway or someplace a slope that faces down, lay a clean tarp, put your quilt on top of it, and gently spray it with your hose. It's not distilled water, but it's clean tap water, hopefully, and it's still better than what's probably on the quilt. And once it's on the tarp and it's been cleaned, you can actually get the long, because PVC pipe comes about 6 feet long, so you can cut it to any size. And you can actually do a partial fold, one on each end, and have 4 people carry it away. Or you can use PVC pipe, because PVC is quite strong and a lot stronger than pipe insulation. But we use PVC when textiles get really heavy, or if it's already pre-rolled, like you roll up a Persian rug and you can just have a big hole in the middle, just stick a PVC pipe through it and carry it away. That way you're not throwing it over your shoulder, creating a harsh crease. So that's what we try to avoid. But once they get larger, feel free to clean them on a tarp, but just same thing, no harsh folds, and just use a buddy system to lift and to flip them and be very gentle. I think the last thing of another question that came up was paintings. How do you dry paintings when they get wet? Pretend like this is a painting. When paintings get wet, it's again, you want to make sure they don't get attached to their frame, or if they have glass, their glass. But we prop them up, and again, I use sponges a lot because I can cut them into quarters or any way I want. And then you just prop them up like that and you lean them up against a wall or something. Just, you want to lean them because you want them to get air circulation from the back and from the bottom. But you want that water to drain out from the bottom and from the back. We don't rinse paintings. There's too many things that can go wrong with flaking from acrylic and oil paints, especially watercolors. Just let them dry kind of naturally and keep an eye out for flaking paint. And you might have to call a painting conservator to help you deal with any sort of flaking down the line. But the best way to dry them is this method. If it's really bad, you can always go back to this method for drying out paintings. Okay? All right, so any questions?
Do you have any specific advice? We got a question online about preserving a wedding dress. Do you have any other specific advice about, should you hose it down like a quilt, or?
Because it's so large, you could. Yes, I would treat it just like a quilt. I would lay it out in the correct shape, hose it off to get all the toxins off, and then hang it up to dry in that method. You could actually, to make sure it's drying the right way, I would actually shape it out in every way possible using pipe insulation, in the sleeves, on the shoulders, even the skirt. just make sure enough moisture is getting to it where no mold can grow. So if she has to take pipe insulation and, you know,
Stuff it like a scarecrow.
do it. But just make sure enough air gets through there to clean it all out. But yeah, just lay it on a tarp, hose it off, and just start drying it. And if she wants to hang it up on a hanger, just make sure the hanger is also padded, depending on the design of the dress. But yeah, that would work. Yeah.
It strikes me that time is a big enemy here. So what would you do if you recovered your items, yet you didn't have the time or the conditions weren't such that you could do these? You know, enclose them, encase them? What do you do to hold?
Freezing is your best friend.
Freezing.
So you can freeze almost anything. You can freeze the textiles just with every fold, interweave it with some wax paper or freezer paper.
I'm thinking about your driveway method, but what if it's, you know, we've got 2 weeks of storms and we can't get out of the driveway?
Just hang it on, no, I was gonna make a bad joke, but I'll stop. But yeah, no, you can just keep freezing things. You know, just borrow your friend's freezer. If you have a deep freezer, use that. It's a hard thing to say, especially if you're not sure what your freezer situation is going to be, because obviously you're not keeping it clear all the time for, you know, this type of material. But with every fold on the textiles, just interweave it with freezer paper. Put it in a freezer bag, stick it in your freezer. You can freeze photos. It's not always recommended, but you can. It's better than losing them, right? And you can freeze books. You can freeze pretty much anything. Do not freeze your paintings and don't freeze the AV stuff, but that's about it. Everything else can pretty much be frozen. And that's just, once again, buying you time where a year down the road, when you finally have time to deal with it, you can pull out 1 at a time, 2 at a time, whatever you can handle. If down the road you just get a team together and you're like, great, we're gonna tackle it all, that's great too. Just as long as you have a plan of how you're gonna deal with it once you pull it out of the freezer. Because it's not gonna be magically healed in the freezer, but it gives you time to deal with it 1 at a time. But yeah, that's the best method.
And can I just add I mean, I know we all think of, oh, put it in the freezer, oh, I have this small refrigerator freezer, but think outside the box. A chest freezer is only a couple $100.
Mm-hmm.
Figure out which of your friends, family members can accommodate a chest freezer that you go buy at Walmart or someplace, or Nebraska Furniture Mart. Put that in the garage, and that couple of $100 invested in a good freezer can save a lot of materials, and you can probably claim it back on your insurance or as part of your, you know, disaster assistance. Keep all your receipts when you do this kind of stuff, and you might be able to apply for public assistance from FEMA.
Yes.
On freezers, like we have an appliance dealer in town, and he'll sometimes let us borrow one that he's brought back into the shop to repair and sell at a discount. But does it make a difference if you use frost-free or one of the older ones?
It doesn't, because the way we're showing you to package them should protect them from frost. So it shouldn't, whatever you can get your hands on is pretty much what we're preparing you for. Because we're preparing you for worst case scenario here. Hopefully you won't have to use half this stuff, but you know, so same with the freezer. We're preparing you for the cheapest, oldest freezer, but it could be better. Yeah.
And just to emphasize that these are salvage techniques, so it's a way to kind of buy you time or prevent mold growth, but a lot of these items aren't going to be reverted back to the pre-disaster state that they were in unless you consult a conservator. So these are just some ways that you can buy yourself some time and try to save some of your things.
And not throw them away, because there is hope. That's all we're offering. But yeah, so when you came in, you were given 2 handouts. Hopefully you picked them up. If not, there's still more. Those are FEMA fact sheets that we helped develop with them. And they're just little tidbits with links to resources on more information of what we're talking about. But we also brought a book we wanted to share with you.
It's called Saving Stuff, Easy Enough to Remember, by Don Williams, who was a conservator at Museum Conservation Institute, Smithsonian. And it's a book that's written for a lay audience and gives you some techniques on ways to preserve your valuable items. And there's a chapter in here about disaster situations as well. So this is a book that we recommend. Unfortunately, it's out of print, but it's still available on Amazon for like $15.
And we just saw them at the Durham Museum.
They have it in the gift shop.
So Yeah, so if you're ever at the Durham Museum, which if you haven't been in a while, now's the time to go because you can buy this book.
There were 6 copies yesterday, so you might still have a
Yeah,
chance.
but we gave a talk there, so we know there's 2 less, so now there's 4.
At least 2 less.
So, yeah, so this is a great book. So even if for every day, how to take care of yourself, but also how to start preparing yourself for, unfortunately, preparing for the next time. And so it's a great book. But don't run off. Please feel free to come up, touch some of the stuff we worked with so you can get a good idea of what we were working with. Come practice pulling stuff out with a porch screen. It takes a little dexterity practice, so start now, start here. And we're happy to stay behind and answer any personalized questions. Yes?
So in researching things on what you guys are teaching us today, through 2 different companies that are nationally known, they recommended that, so all your steps, and then for photo preservation, but then as well as the final after drying to scan everything.
Mm-hmm.
But then it was recommended that maybe those things should all be destroyed just simply because they have the mold in them, and if they get to the moisture level, it's all going to activate again as well. Is that something you'd recommend or not necessarily?
I wouldn't recommend, I never recommend destroying anything.
I know, yeah.
But
That's a hard one for people to take, but.
yeah, this is your stuff. This is your life. I'm not going to tell you to destroy your stuff because you're worried about future health things. It's your call. Mold will only be reactivated if you put it in a really humid environment. And the way you keep your house naturally is a normal humidity level. So unless you put it back in the basement, back in the attic where there's no humidity control, yeah, mold will come back.
So rather, if you're not going to continue taking care of them after you're
then you might want to consider, an alternative home for it. I won't say destroy it, but find an alternative home, whether that's another historical society, depending on what it is, or something else. But our whole thing is we're advocating for things not to be thrown away because that's your story, that's your life, and that's something for you to enjoy. But yeah, the whole point of saving stuff in these other books is there are ways.
Yeah.
There are totally ways to keep things in good condition, even if they've once been exposed to mold and bad events. So,
or at the very least, you could just take a picture of it, and at least you have a memory of it with you.
Yeah.
Even if you
So
don't
scanning does
keep
help,
the
but
physical
yeah.
object.
But no, we will not advocate for throwing it away.
Keep it somehow.
Yeah. Yeah.
One of our online participants asked if you had any other good websites to reference or any other books that you recommend.
Oh, so many. So the ones on the FEMA fact sheets are the ones that we find are the easiest for public. There is I'm blanking on the best ones.
Well, we have a lot of resources on the Smithsonian Cultural Rescue Initiative website.
Oh yeah,
which
our
is,
website.
culturalrescue.si.edu, and so the fact sheets are there as well as several other resources. So that might be a good step.
Yeah, culturalrescue.si.edu.
Yeah.
And yeah, start there. That will get you a lot of great places. For books wise, start with saving stuff. And then, yeah, I'm trying to think if there's another good one for public consumption. Oh, there's one called, I think, Caring for Family Treasures. Can't remember the author. It'll come to me at midnight tonight. But yeah, Caring for Family Treasures is a good one. That would be another great place to start.
Center has one too.
What's that called?
Ford Conservation, if you just go to their website.
Okay, Ford
and
Conservation
they've got
Center.
by category that you can click.
Okay, yeah, so check out the Ford Conservation Center's website. Probably a lot of the same resources that I'm like running through, and I'm just like, oh, okay, great. All right, any other questions? If not, everyone should come up and check out some stuff. We carried it all.
They should thank our.
Oh, you can also thank us. Yes, please come play. Well, thanks, everyone.
Oh, and one of our online participants just said Jane and Richard Long wrote Caring for Family Treasures.
Oh,
Does that sound right?
sure.
Thank you.
I can picture the book on my bookshelf, and yes.
Thank you, Beth.
Thanks.
And also one more word for our online participants again. We will have a recording of this up on our website this week, and we will post the handouts that our presenters brought with us today. So for those that weren't here to grab them, they will be online.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I can't find them, but you can go in your stack.
Oh,
If you're working on it, we appreciate you coming.
Oh, well, thanks for
appreciate
coming.
your coming.
Yeah.
This time you don't think there is a a place you can get to save your things, so it's nice to know that.
Yeah,
if not all,
unfortunately.
you can save some.
Yeah, we're still trying to find the perfect timing. We don't want to come too early, but we don't want to come too late.